For centuries, the Christian world has sought the exact location where God descended to earth in fire, where the clouds trembled, and where the people of Israel gathered to receive the law. Maps pointed to Egypt, to the Sinai Peninsula, where a mountain became a sacred symbol, but perhaps not for what it is, but for what we were told it would be. What if we are looking at the wrong place? What if the signs, the tour guides, and the school books are based not on revelation, but on convenience? What would happen if the true mountain of revelation were in another country, in another land? And more importantly, if it were still surrounded by unmistakable signs of God's presence? Exodus 19:18 says, "The whole of Mount Sinai was covered in smoke, because the Lord had descended on it in fire. The smoke rose like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain trembled greatly." Words like these do not describe a spiritual symbol, they describe a physical phenomenon. Real fire, real trembling, a mountain transformed by something supernatural. And now, in the heart of Saudi Arabia, there is a mountain that bears these marks like an open wound that never healed. Its name, Jebel al-Lawz. This mountain, little known and completely off the traditional tourist routes, has been pointed out by researchers as the exact location where the events of Sinai may have occurred. And it's not just about theory, it's about evidence. Split stones, burned ancient monuments, drawings carved into rocks that echo stories from the Exodus, and all of this surrounded by fences, soldiers, and warning signs that say one thing: do not enter. Let's start with the most striking detail: the scorched summit. Unlike the surrounding mountains, the top of Jebel al-Lawz appears to have been exposed to extreme heat. Satellites show its dark, almost black coloration, as if it had been struck by an explosion. Geologists confirm there is no volcanic activity in the region, and the type of rock present there is not the kind that darkens due to common erosion. So what could have caused this mark? A local fire? Unlikely, and there's not enough vegetation. A lightning strike? Perhaps. But why only this peak and no others? And why does the pattern of darkening match a description written millennia ago in a sacred book? But the scorched mountain is just the beginning. Nearby there is a gigantic rock, over 6 meters tall, split in half with almost surgical precision. Located in a dry terrain with no rivers or lakes, this rock bears signs of water erosion at its base, as if rivers had gushed from it. In Exodus 17, we read that the people, thirsty in the desert, complained to Moses, and God commanded him to strike the rock so that water would flow from it. Now think, what are the chances that a split rock with signs of water flow is there by coincidence, especially in a place where there's no natural reason for it to happen? And it doesn't stop there. At the foot of the mountain, there is a series of stones arranged in a circle, forming what many believe to be an ancient altar. And around these stones, figures of bulls and calves are carved, a highly unusual find for local art. But not for those familiar with Exodus 32. There we read about the people's rebellion when Moses delayed on the mountain's summit, and they built a golden calf to worship. That was one of the greatest betrayals in Israel's history, and the image of that calf remains etched not only in the scriptures, but apparently also in the stone. Further along, there are the 12 pillars, 12 large stones erected vertically, placed side by side, each representing one of the tribes of Israel. Exodus 24:4 clearly states that Moses built these pillars. The place where these pillars were found is remote, with no agricultural or commercial value. Who would have built them there, and why, if not to follow very specific instructions? But perhaps the most disturbing detail of all is the stone boundaries. Yes, there is a natural fence formed by carefully stacked stones around the base of the mountain. They don't form a house, a corral, or an irrigation system. They simply enclose, like a warning, like a barrier between the sacred and the profane. In Exodus 19:12, God commands Moses, "Set boundaries around the mountain for the people, saying, 'Take care not to go up the mountain or touch its edge. Anyone who touches the mountain will surely die.'" This was written millennia ago, and today there is the fence, untouched, solitary, and yet full of purpose. Now think with me. If all of this were in a free, open place, accessible for visitation, study, and public investigation, we might think it's just coincidence. But that's not the case. Jebel al-Lawz is a forbidden zone. The Saudi government surrounds it with barbed wire. Soldiers patrol the area. Researchers have been arrested for trying to photograph the artifacts. Images are deleted. drones are shot down. Even satellite platforms like Google Earth show glitches and distortions in the region. All of this around a mountain that, according to the official narrative, should have no historical significance. Why so much protection? What is there that needs to be hidden? Why does a country that proudly displays its archaeological sites keep this mountain under lock and key? The answer may not be just political, it may be spiritual. We are faced with a discovery that challenges not only geography, but also religious tradition, tourism, and theology. Most of the Christian world places Sinai in Egypt, near the famous St. Catherine's Monastery. Millions of pilgrims have climbed that mountain, believing they were following in Moses' footsteps. But what if they're mistaken? What if the true sacred mountain is in another nation, where for centuries no one dared to look? If this is true, it changes everything. It changes the geography of faith. It changes the map of promises. And more importantly, it changes the time we live in. Because if this mountain is being revealed now, in this time, it's not just by chance. It may be a sign, a warning, a call. The call echoing from this forgotten mountain is not just geological or archaeological, it's spiritual. Because everything that aligns there with the biblical account doesn't just speak to the intellect, it speaks to the soul. When Moses climbed the mountain to hear God's voice, he wasn't going sightseeing. He was receiving instructions that would forever change the destiny of a nation. And now, as this mountain resurfaces in evidence, in photos, in maps, perhaps the question isn't just whether it's real, but what God is trying to tell us through it today. The scriptures have always connected geography with prophecy. When God chose Jerusalem, it wasn't for its altitude or landscape, but for its purpose. When he led Abraham to Moriah or Elijah to Carmel, each mountain became an altar of revelation. And when we read in Micah 4:1, "In the last days the mountain of the Lord's house will be established at the top of the mountains," we are being prepared for the return of a spiritual centrality on earth. And if part of that return involves bringing to light the true mountain of the original covenant, the place where God spoke with fire, this has prophetic implications that go far beyond archaeology. There is something profoundly symbolic in the fact that this mountain is surrounded by barbed wire. The people of Israel couldn't touch it either. It was sacred, set apart. God's fire wasn't decorative, it was a manifestation of glory that consumed what was impure. The order was clear: do not approach. And that order remains alive in the stones, in the boundaries, in the invisible fear that still hovers over the place. It's as if the ground has memory, as if the earth remembers the day God descended, and yet today the world ignores it, because accepting that Jebel al-Lawz is the true Sinai is also admitting that we've been wrong for centuries. It's admitting that tradition has led us down the wrong path, that the signs on the roads and the school maps are outdated, that what was comfortable to believe must be abandoned in light of unsettling evidence. And few things are harder for humans than abandoning a tradition, even when it's wrong. Imagine the impact of this. Churches will have to revise manuals. Tour guides will have to change their routes. Theologians will have to reconsider centuries of assumptions. And more, governments will have to decide whether to reveal or conceal, because if this mountain is what it seems to be, it becomes a heritage of global faith. And that bothers those who prefer to control the narrative. And it's not just the Christian faith that would be affected. Islam recognizes Moses as a prophet. Judaism has in Sinai a pillar of its identity. The revelation of this site would touch 3 religions at once, like a thunderclap breaking centuries of silence. This wouldn't just be a discovery, it would be an interruption in the course of history. That's why so many forces work to silence this mountain. And that's also why it insists on speaking, not with words, but with marks, not with speeches, but with split stones, tribal pillars, scorched summits, and intact fences. Everything about it points to the invisible made visible, to the eternal crossing time, to heaven touching earth. But why now? Why have these discoveries only come to light in this century? Why do satellites now show what our eyes never saw? Why do blurred images on maps spark global suspicions? Perhaps because this is the prophetic time of restoration, a time when what was hidden will be revealed, a time when God calls his people to repentance again, not with thunder, but with revelations. Jesus said in Luke 8:17, "For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be known or brought out into the open." Those words, spoken 2,000 years ago, seem to echo with special force now. Because if God is revealing the mountain of his presence, perhaps it's because he wants to restore the fear of his voice. The world has trivialized the sacred. It has relativized the eternal. It has turned glory into allegory. But God was never a metaphor. And his presence was never symbolic. It was fire. It was trembling. It was boundary. And perhaps now, before a generation that no longer recognizes the boundaries between the holy and the profane, God is pointing to the mountain again and saying, I am still here. Not in relics, but in signs. Not in tourism, but in truth. The mountain is not a destination. It's a call. Because in the end, this mountain forces us to make a decision. The decision to keep living comfortably with what's convenient, or to face the truth even if it costs us. The decision to hide the light to protect human traditions, or to expose the darkness to honor divine revelation. The truth is not easy. It demands humility, it demands repentance, it demands change. And that's why many will resist this revelation, because it's easier to climb a tourist mountain in Egypt than to face the God who still burns a mountain in Arabia. But what about you? Will you keep accepting what you were taught, or will you investigate what God is revealing? Will you repeat what you heard, or will you seek with your own eyes? Will you be a guardian of tradition or a messenger of truth? The choice has never been so urgent, because if Sinai has truly been rediscovered, then God is calling us not just to see, but to respond, to obey, to fear, to believe again. And if this mountain has resurfaced now, it's not just to satisfy historical curiosity. It's to activate faith. It's to awaken hearts. It's to say that he still speaks and still calls. You were chosen to live in this time, not by chance, but by purpose. And if God is raising the stones of the covenant mountain again, perhaps it's because he also wants to raise sleeping hearts. Jebel al-Lawz is not just a place, it's a reminder, an echo from heaven asking the people to listen, fear, and return. The same God who descended in fire is now kindling another flame within you. And the question he asks is simple, yet profound. Do you still hear me? Because if the mountain has been revealed, it's because the voice is still speaking. Listen, respond, return.